Nostalgia is inescapable. Whether you're watching TV, grocery shopping, or out at the movies, it is ever present. Considered a disorder for centuries, nostalgia has become an immensely powerful marketing tool. TLDR is the monthly video series where the team at Dose unpacks trending conversations. This month on the show, we explore how social marketing research can help you harness the power of nostalgia, and we're kicking that conversation off with Disney. So we just saw the full trailer for the upcoming Aladdin live-action film drop, and we're seeing a lot of these live-action reboots coming from Dumbo and Lion King later this year. Lots of buzz in the air on these films, and obviously there seems to be something in the air here. Why should brands care about this nostalgia trend that we're seeing so much?
Well, let me start by saying that calling it a trend is very odd to me. That's how a lot of news outlets and people are referring to it. But if you look back at marketing and advertising through history, specifically in the US, nostalgia has been used since like the 20s to brand stuff, to sell things like that. I feel like now we're reaching this kind of saturation point. But with that said, I think brands should definitely be paying attention because the market is so immersed in it right now, because it's super powerful, and because it's personal. Because brands can connect to the personal aspect of it, they're able to sell a lot more products, get people to, or motivate people to do things, go out to movies, buy clothes, buy groceries, things like that. And one of the reasons, or another one of the reasons they should be paying attention is just to see how brands are doing it correctly and incorrectly, right? They want to know how they can use it or if they should not even be using it. If we look at some examples of brands who have tried to use it and failed, like Burger King and with the Super Bowl ad, there are a lot of times when they could have paid attention to the market and seeing what has worked. And then even looking deeper into that, they need to really kind of look at the insights and figure out why things work in terms of nostalgia and why they don't.
So Burger King, they had the Andy Warhol, right?
They had the Andy Warhol one, which was very tone deaf. And if they did their research and knew their audience better, they would understand that that ad doesn't make much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree that nostalgia is powerful, mainly for the emotional aspect. Like, when people look back, you don't necessarily think of the negative things. Like, it's sort of like rose-colored glasses, so it's not only an emotion, but it's a positive emotion. So brands using nostalgia in marketing really adds an emotional connection to your messaging, but also humanizes brand. So it's a chance for you to connect with your audience, and they can kind of relate to you more as sort of like a person or a friend versus some unknown entity.
That makes sense. So, I mean, I think a lot of this makes sense when you have good nostalgia around your brand, or there's good vibes happening, but obviously this can go wrong too. So what do we think are some of the ways that brands, they're trying to tap into some nostalgia? How can you do it wrong? We talked about the Burger King example a little bit, but what are some other situations where we've seen that?
I think in general, nostalgia is very hit or miss. And although there's brands that have very successful campaigns, there are a few pitfalls that they can also encounter. The first one I can think of is that it's a little obvious, but nostalgia is different depending on the generation. And so an ad that's targeting a millennial will obviously be different than an ad targeting a baby boomer. And so I think brands need to be very intentional with what they're doing and make sure that they're broadcasting the message in the proper environment to get engagement. And second of all, I think another pitfall is that you can't use it exclusively. Nostalgia shouldn't be the only thing in your ad. I think you need to have other positive brand attributes and other emotions paired with it to help connect with a consumer and their desire to buy something. If an ad is just nostalgic or there's just a moment out of context and it's not really relatable, it isn't as successful as an ad that's maybe multi-leveled. And then one last pitfall I think is that nostalgia can have mixed messages for people in different populations. And so if you're a global brand or you're running a global ad with nostalgia as the focus, I think you need to be brands need to be very intentional and make sure they have the proper representation and the proper life moments that are reflective of those viewing the actual advertisement.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that a lot of brands can easily fall into like that, I'm gonna use something nostalgic, everyone's gonna say, aw, it's gonna be cute, everyone's gonna love it, but there's like, it's not an automatic home run, it has to be strategic in order for it to work well. Like you said, like you have to have the right reference for the right audience group at the right time, otherwise it's gonna totally fall flat. And like back to that Andy Warhol example, you know, that might have resonated well as like just a like national campaign, who knows, but like it was a Super Bowl ad, and then you think about who the audience is in the Super Bowl and that changes the entire context of the reference. I think another thing when using a pop culture reference or song or a person, you have to make sure that the tie to your brand is super clear, otherwise it's gonna make no sense and it's just nostalgia for the sake of nostalgia, which doesn't work. And I think something else that's interesting talking about Disney and like how every single thing that Disney has put out lately feels like it's been a remake is like, what is too much? And I think one of the reasons nostalgia is so powerful is because you miss something and you get like a tiny taste of it and you're like, oh my God, I remember that, I miss it so much. And when like everything coming at you is like something from your childhood, it kind of like loses some of the like, the happiness surrounding it. You're like, oh yeah, another remake, you know, when is it too much?
To kind of add on to what both of you all are saying, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is this one-size-fits-all kind of approach to it. And that's why it's important to understand your audience, to really define that audience and refine that audience, figure out what questions you want answered and figure out what you want to accomplish with, you know, whatever rollout you're working on. And I think that's one of the things that we do here at Dose. We identify those issues early on, we ask those questions, and we can figure out what the best audience, what the best target, what the best scope is for each brand.
So I think we saw that recently. We were working with a food company that has a lot of nostalgia connected to some of their products. And they were trying to launch a new product. They weren't really sure how to position it, how to even name it. I'm a little foggy here on the details. What did we see there? I mean, I think that was interesting how nostalgia played into that testing.
Yeah, they initially I think they were nervous. I think there's another misconception is that nostalgia can make you dated, and it's kind of like the opposite of innovation in a way, looking back instead of forward. And I think they were nervous about leaning too much into the nostalgia aspect, because the product was so new and different. But, you know, we kind of found that we were able to show them like with numbers and data that maybe that's not the right way to go, and just because you know, it's what you thought isn't always correct. And we were able to prove it by showing real people saying like, no, you know, this reminds me of when I was young and like meals I used to make with my mom, my grandma. And so yeah, we were able to kind of flip their assumption on its head and say, maybe you should be continuing to lean into this.
Yeah, that was really cool to see. It's always good through testing to challenge your assumptions, and you know when you did the test right, like you aren't just leading to the solution that you want. So, what are some other ways brands can use social market research to harness this power of nostalgia?
I feel like it's kind of what we were already saying, but being able to pinpoint what your audience is actually interested, just like what Kevin was saying. You might have a moment you really want to share, but if it's not the right moment for your audience, you may as well just not share it. So I think just like figuring out what your audience is actually interested in and leaning into that.
Mm-hmm. To add to what Nessa's saying, in terms of audiences, some brands even go so far as to using specific social platforms to market certain things. We saw that with Gillette, you know, with YouTube specific marketing. We saw that with Always with the Throw Like a Girl or Like a Girl campaign. We saw that with Dove, Choose Beautiful campaign. A lot of them chose specifically YouTube for a reason, and that's because they did the social market research on it. That's the best platform to roll that out. Those commercials probably wouldn't work as well on TV, but they had such a viral impact because they were rolled out on platforms like YouTube. Those are the kind of things we can unlock with social market research.
Very cool. Well, anything else? Anyone have hot feelings on the Jonas Brothers single that just came out while we're talking about nostalgia?
Congratulations, it's #1. They're back.
people bought into that. Like that worked perfectly. Like they had been apart for just the right amount of time that they came back and everyone was like, yes. It's the same thing kind of, it reminds me of Monsters Inc. releasing Monsters University, like right at the age when all of our generation was starting college. It's like the right exact moment in time that it just is like, yes, I love it.
Even like Toy Story 4 is coming out soon, and people I feel like it crosses so many generations now because of how many years they're spaced apart. Look at The Incredibles 2, like it spanned how many years? It came out, was humongous.
I saw it in the theaters.
Yeah. So I feel like those are examples of people who've gotten it right, who know how to time it and pace it correctly.
I also think another interesting example recently was Budweiser. For International Women's Day, they ran that print ad in the New York Times split between, they kind of realized they had some negative nostalgia connected to the sexism of their old ads. And so they ran this side by side in the Times that really showed, them as a brand taking a more progressive stance and really owning up to mistakes they'd made in the past. I thought that was something really cool. And when you're doing something connected, especially to a holiday like International Women's Day, it's always tricky territory and you want to be sure you're doing it right. So I can only imagine as a brand as big as Budweiser, they probably did a lot of research and a lot of work went into doing that the right way. Because that could have backfired just as easily. And I think we're seeing that with other brands. You don't always want to be turning on Twitter, for the wrong reasons. So, well, great. I think that's all the time that we have for this month on TLDR. Check back with us next month. Thank you all for joining us. And for you watching, be sure to let us know what social marketing challenges you'd like us to tackle next.